Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Callie, and today I'm going to be going through my June wrap-up. So my overall stats for June was I read a total of 27 books, a total of 8,282 pages, 97 hours and 35 minutes of audiobook, DNF'd 5 books, and reread 2. For formatting, I have 15 printed, 5 ebooks, and 7 audiobooks. And then for my genre breakdown, I've got 15 fantasy, 9 romance, 1 thriller, 1 sci-fi, and 1 historical fiction. So without further ado, I'm going to go through these in the order that I read them. So first up was a reread, and that is The Bright and the Pale by Jessica Rubinkowski. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. This was a solid book. It is very YA, very cold, very desolate. This is a gods taking over humans kind of plotline, but I love the Russian-inspired folklore of it all. And the ambiance was my favorite part of this entire story. Next, I listened to 1:35 a.m. By Scott Cawthon, Elley Cooper, and Andrea Waggener. This is a Five Nights at Freddy's novella. This is the 3rd one in the Fazbear Fright series. The audiobook was relatively solid for each of these stories. They were creepy, kooky, everything FNAF is known for. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars as well. Next, I read Castles in Their Bones by Sebastian. I really liked this. I gave this 4.5 stars. This follows triplet sisters who are the daughters of an empress who wants to conquer the entire world. So when the girls are born, she makes these alliances to the 3 neighboring countries, and it is finally time for the girls to complete their destiny and take over those countries from the inside as the new queens, princesses, wives of these boys in the neighboring kingdoms. This has so much of like toxic family dynamics. It's got so many just intrigue, a lot of political aspects to this story, but each girl is very different, has different likes, dislikes, and traits, and views their mother's plan differently, which I found to be the most fascinating aspect of this entire book. I really liked it. I cannot wait to get to book 2 this month. Next, I read Wrath and Mercy by Jessica Rubinkowski, which is the sequel to The Bright and the Pale. This I also gave 3.5 stars. I liked the direction that this went, the corruption of a soul aspect, and then again the gods versus humans debate, which is always a big thing in fantasy books. My biggest issue was the pacing was a bit all over the place with this. But I thought this was a very solid duology. Next, I listened to The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. I'm a big Bridgerton fan, so I finally bit the bullet and read this. Now, I have watched all of the Bridgerton stuff, so I knew what was going to happen. I have heard that there were differences within the seasons and the books. This one felt very much like a carbon copy of what happened, which is totally fine, and I still very much enjoyed it. I love Daphne and Simon, and I just had a better image of them in my head. I ended up giving this 4 stars, and the audiobook was done really well. Next, I finished a series I've been working on literally all year, and that is Vardaesia by Lynette. This is the finale to the Medoran Chronicles, which starts with Akora, which is a portal YA fantasy following a girl from Earth who finds herself in Medora and then the center of this huge political nonsense. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. This is a fantastic finale. It was building from the beginning. I did find it a little bit long. Some things were dragged out that didn't necessarily need to be, but I did love how everything wrapped up, and I would love just another novella series following the aftermath of this book, because it was just going back to Medora would be phenomenal and everything that I ever want. I will always recommend this series to anyone who wants to jump into fantasy. It is a great starting series if you are nervous about jumping into fantasy at all. would recommend. Up next, I have To Flame a Wildflower by Sarah A. Parker. This is the third book in the To Bleed a Crystal Bloom series. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This one's definitely my favorite of the entire series. I feel like, I've said this a few times, but the books feel more like a character study on how people deal with trauma. This is where I feel like we're actually getting a plot between Orlaith and Rorden. We've kind of addressed our trauma a little bit. I still have a ton of questions about some backgrounds and how everything like that works, but I feel like we're getting into the meat of the story and all of that. So I'm really excited to continue on. I have no idea when it's going to continue on, but I will be here for it. Next, I listened to Dry by Neal and Jarrod Shusterman. This is a book essentially asking what if California ran out of water, which is a very real thing that could happen to California. They have gone through very strict water restrictions and stuff like that. So this was a very real possibility. However, this being from the eyes of teenagers was wild. Like, there were no adults to be found, just they conveniently were gone. And it was fascinating in the political aspect as well as the mob mentality aspect, but these kids were just dumb and you couldn't like any of them. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. It is not my favorite Shusterman book, unfortunately. Up next, I have Deadly Dreams by KJ Sutton. This is the 3rd book in the Fortuna Sworn series. I love where this series is going. After the events of book 2, I was very shook, and this dealt with a lot of the mental health crises that would be natural after the events of book 2. And I just found it fascinating to see Fortuna and Khalith's traumas, not quite in their own eyes, definitely Fortuna's in her own eyes, Khalith a little less, as well as all the political aspects of running a Fae kingdom. And then you have all these other magical creatures as well. I am so intrigued as to just where this is going. There are so many twists and turns throughout this entire series, and Fortuna's just feels like she's just getting yeeted all around for this. We also have like The Hunt, which is a very notorious myth retelling, so being able to see the like Fae hunt was fascinating. And then again, yeah, just all the PTSD for Khalith and Fortuna. There's so many questions about this series that I have that I hope will eventually get answers to. Up next, I have A Pack of Vow and Tears by Olivia Wildenstein. This is book 2 in the Pack of Blood and Lies series. So there's an original trilogy and then there's a spin-off book. So this is book 2 of the trilogy aspect, and I just love this story. It is a great shifter romance. There was a love triangle that I didn't hate, and I just thoroughly enjoyed the story. We have the whole alpha thing. Now we have this warring packs aspect to it for the next 2 books, and I just found all of that, along with the trauma and trying to fit in tropes that came with book 1. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I thoroughly enjoy the stories. Next, I have These Infinite Threads by Tahereh Mafi. This is the sequel to This Woven Kingdom. This was interesting because this took place like over the course of 2 or 3 days, this entire book, after the events of the end of This Woven Kingdom. And it was slow and fast all at the same time. I had to keep reminding myself that it had barely been a day, but you learn so much within this book. And I have switched teams, which is totally fine. Cameron and Eliza are such interesting characters, and I don't even know. I gave this book 4 stars, mainly because of the pacing. The content itself was so fascinating, and I love Cyrus. He is a brand new character, kind of. You meet him at the end of This Woven Kingdom, but you really get to know him within this story, and it is phenomenally done. Cyrus just feels he's got that big main character energy, and he loves that for himself. So I am very intrigued as to where book 3 is going to go. I also have no idea if this is a trilogy or a longer series. I would love it if it was a longer series, because then we can get more of the political aspect between Cyrus, Eliza, and Cameron. But trilogies are kind of a thing. So I would also expect a trilogy. And I'm hoping that book 3 will be bigger than this one. Because it it felt too short and too long all at the same time, which is a very weird thing to do. Next, I have A Pack of Love and Hate, which is the third book in the Pack of Blood and Lies series by Olivia Wildenstein. This completes Nell's story. Boy, did it complete Nell's story. I did want more after it ended, but I was okay with where the fourth book ended up going. I ended up giving this 4 stars. This is just a solid trilogy, and Nell and August have my entire heart. Their relationship is so sweet, and as much as I love Liam, I feel like there are better things out there for Liam, as I will talk about later when I get to book 4. Next, I have Rage and Ruin by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the second book in the Storm and Fury series, which is an Angels and Demons Gargoyles YA fantasy story. I would actually categorize this as NA. There are some naughty scenes in here that are not good for young adults. But I really like this. I know that book 2 is a bit polarizing. I only ever heard really bad things, and that it had sequel syndrome, second book syndrome, whatever you want to call it. I really liked it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I was intrigued. The Trinity and Zane, this was more character development than plot. We did get like big twists at the end, which I'm excited to get to for Grace. I think it's Grace and Glory is the third book. I'm just intrigued to see where all that's going to combine, because I think this is only a trilogy. But this was more character development for both Zane and Trinity with their new relationship. Not the relationship you're thinking about. If you've read the book, you know their new relationship. But it's fascinating for them to navigate how they have to act around each other, considering the buildup of their relationship in book 1. I really like this. Like I said, I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was really good. Up next, I listened to The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I've heard really good things about this book for years, and I had been putting it off. I didn't own the book, so I didn't have a good incentive to read it, but I found it on Scribd, and I finally listened to it, and I hated this book. I hated it. The 2 main characters were annoying. It was all just one big miscommunication trope. The whole point was the main female character was all about honesty, being upfront, and when she finally tells the truth, or when she tells her boyfriend and her sister the truth about something, both of them are like, oh, you're just lying to get attention. And it was this huge thing where just no one believed her, and it agitated me so much, and it was awful. I was seething texting Sarah the entire time that plotline was going through. I didn't care for the main couple. They didn't have really good chemistry on page for me, and I gave it 3 stars. I was not a fan. Next is my favorite book that I read in June, and that is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This book was so good. This is very much Victorian era, maybe early 1900s kind of setting, but with magic. And there are these 2 rival journalists, Iris and Roma. They're both vying for this main writer role at this newspaper. And her brother is off at this war between gods. There's these called warriors who fight for the gods that are happening way outside of the city that they live in. And Iris starts to discover that the letters she's been writing to her brother via her typewriter start getting responses back. She knows it's not her brother. She just there's these like magic typewriter things happening, and she decides to go and try and find her brother in the middle of this war as a war correspondent for a rival newspaper. And then we have Roman, who is just, this gives big Dramoni vibes, and I loved every second of it. The letters to each other were so beautiful, and I just the communication between the letters you get. And the thing about it is you don't get a description of what was said, you get the letters. They start with like almost each chapter, or the end of each chapter you get a letter, and I am obsessed. I need book 2 now. I love Roman and Iris so much. They are one of my favorite couples of all time. I gave this 5 stars in case that wasn't obvious. Up next I have A Pack of Storms and Silence, which is the spin-off of the original trilogy for Pack of Bun Lies by Olivia Wildenstein. This is Liam's story. This was perfect for Liam. This happens about a year and a half, 2 years after the events of A Pack of Love and Hate. And that was perfection. You get to see Liam as a single dad, and then you also get this whole new pack dynamic after the events of A Pack of Love and Hate. And I find that really fascinating. We have this whole compound, and then there's this whole vampire werewolf kind of issue going on almost in the background, which was so fascinating. This was definitely the longest by a lot, but it was so intriguing and I could not put it down. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Up next, I have Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor. This is the sequel to Daughter of Smoke and Bone, which is another angel and demon story. But this time they're on opposite ends of a war now that the events of the first book have kind of happened. It's very hard to talk about sequels without spoiling what happens in previous books, but I'm doing my best. I didn't like this one as much. This one definitely had second book syndrome. I was bored throughout it. I was skimming a good chunk of the middle. The only time things happen is at the very beginning, at the very end. And I ended up giving this 3 stars. I was just bored for most of it, and it lost a lot of that intrigue that book 1 gave me. Up next, I have The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Charaborty. I listened to this on audio, which I would 110% recommend. It was phenomenally done. This is a pirate adventure following a female pirate, Amina Al-Sirafi, as she goes on one last mission to protect her family. And this is filled with so many magical creatures, with djinn, with krakens, and all of these really cool seafaring adventures. And it's told like her own biography, like an autobiography. It is being written by someone else, but in her own words. And it is fascinating how this story unfolds. I adored every second of this. It was so interesting to get this. And it almost felt like a cozy fantasy, but it did have high stakes. And I don't know what crack Shannon put into this, but there was crack because I could not stop listening to it. It was a constant going on at work, in the car, going out on walks, doing my workouts, everything. I was listening to this book. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. Loved it. Next, I have Fireheart by Emma Hamm. This I borrowed from Sarah, which is why I don't have the copy anymore. But this is a fae dragon fantasy romance book. I'm currently reading book 2 on my Kindle, and I'm really enjoying it. I ended up giving this 4 stars. This was solid. This was everything I could have ever wanted out of a fae dragon fantasy romance. We have an evil king. We have the magic community being suppressed by the humans. We have an ageless dragon who is grumpy half the time, and he actually turns into a legit dragon and causes chaos. I really enjoyed this. It was super fun and just everything I could have asked for in a fantasy romance. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Next, I have Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is a companion to Part of Your World, which I read last year and loved. This one was no different. Apparently the theme for this month is letters to each other, because this one starts off as letters given between 2 doctors working in an ER. The main character, Bree, kind of gets a bad impression from the new ER doctor and vice versa. So he writes her a letter apologizing, and it just sort of snowballs from there. He has really bad social anxiety as well as some other aspects, and she helps him with that. He feels very comfortable with her and he wants to continue that feeling, whereas Bree is getting very burnt out from her sick brother with her career goals as a doctor, and as just her divorce as well, which I think just ends at the very beginning of this book, or finalized. I give this 5 stars. This was so good. The relationship came off the page, so beautifully written, and just every aspect of this was fantastic, just as good as Part of Your World. The epilogue was everything, made me sob, which was great. I love Abby Jimenez's writing. She's able to bring these characters and breathe life into them and their stories. I have 5 stars. I don't know if I said that or not. Next, I have First Down by Grace Reilly. I have been getting so many recommendations for the second book in this series, which I think is Breakaway. But I can't just read book 2 without reading book 1. So this is a college football romance that is fake dating. We have a girl who can't get her ex-boyfriend to leave her alone, so she kisses this brand new football player on her ex-boyfriend's team, and she's like, please help me. I need him to go away and leave me alone, and he needs a writing tutor. Thus, our fake relationship happens. Naturally, it's a fake dating. However, there are a lot of really hard-hitting topics within this story that I really appreciated. You have toxic relationships, you have abuse, you also have figuring out your priorities. Mental health is discussed very heavily within this, and just so many amazing topics are handled phenomenally within this romance. I gave this 4.5 stars. I loved this. Up next, I picked up Unfortunately Yours by Tessa Bailey because I pre-ordered it. This came out in June, so naturally I read it in June. This is the companion to Secretly Yours, which came out, I think, in February. Now, I didn't care for Secretly Yours. It was okay, it was fine, but it didn't have that, I don't know what to describe it as, thing that I get from Tessa Bailey. This one did. It was filthy. It was fantastic. The characters, again, jumped off the page, and the chemistry was immaculate. This is a marriage of convenience. She needs to get in her inheritance by getting married, and he needs a loan, which he will only get if he marries a wine heiress, or his chances of getting this loan astronomically ascends if he marries this wine heiress. And they hate each other. He's a former Navy SEAL, and she has a lot of childhood trauma. I loved this. This made up for everything that Secretly Yours wasn't. The characters were fantastic. The love story was great. Their chemistry was so good. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I adored every second of this. Next, I have another June release that I picked up immediately. I actually went with Hannah and one of Hannah's friends to go and meet Allie Hazelwood and a couple other authors for Love Theoretically by Allie Hazelwood. This is definitely Dramoni vibes, by the way. This was fake dating, but fall for your fake dating, fake boyfriend's brother. If that, you want to track that, go nuts. Essentially, Elsie is doing this thing called Fibber or something like that. I don't remember the name of the app. But it's a way for her to make money by going on these fake dates with guys to make sure to show off at family events and stuff like that. It is nothing like prostitution. It is just fake dating for money. But when she is up for a candidacy at MIT, the brother of the guy she has been doing this with is one of the people reviewing her, and she has to try and explain, and then she finds out he has feelings for her, and it just it snowballed from there. This was really good in the way of character development. We have Elsie, who molds herself to be what she wants other people to think, what would make other people happy instead of herself. And Jack catches on to that really well and continuously calls her out on it, and he just wants her to be herself. And it is a beautiful love story in that aspect. And I gave this 5 stars. I loved this so much. Another fantastic Allie Hazelwood book. Plus we had a cameo from Adam and Olive, which I adored. Next I have another reread, and that is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas for my entire Maas readathon in publication order. So I love Queen of Shadows. This is where everything kind of starts to come together. And it is my second favorite in the entire series of Throne of Glass, just because Aelin is big chaotic energy throughout this entire book. Plus we get Rowan, and I gave this 5 stars. I listened to it. The audiobook is fantastic, and I love Queen of Shadows. Aelin really comes into her own in this one, and I love that for her and seeing that growth over the past couple of books. Next, I read The Fiancé Farce by Alexandria Bellefleur. This is a fake engagement, and this one's wild. We have this very Cinderella-esque main character, one of the girls. It's very Cinderella-esque. She wants to save her bookstore, but she ends up lying about having a girlfriend to get out of family events to see her ex-boyfriend because her cousin is dating and getting married to said ex-boyfriend. and she just lies about having this girlfriend who is a cover model for a romance book she sees in her story. The cover model needs to get married to get the family inheritance of a publishing agency. And when they meet together, she is the cousin of the ex-boyfriend. So at the wedding, they end up, their lies kind of mix, and they're like, yeah, it's totally us. We're getting married in the next 2 months. And they have this whole fake dating, fake engaged aspect. This was so cute. My only big gripe is the families suck. The main characters were awesome. Loved these two. And then majority of their friends were good. There was a couple friends who I could do without. If you've read it, you obviously know. But my biggest issue is just the families never really saw that comeuppance. We didn't really get a sense that they were over it or dealt with the family issues, which there was a lot of. But I ended up giving this 4 stars. The romance was really sweet. I loved the main characters. The spice was good. And this was just a this was just a fantastic sapphic romance. I was in a sapphic romance mood because then I listened to Queen Takes Rose by Katie Robert. I've been meaning to get to this book for so long. It is the final book besides the mini novella series for the Disney Villains romance series. This one is Maleficent and Aurora, and this was wild. I mean, I continually forget how filthy these books are. Definitely 5 chili peppers, however you want to call it, the highest amount of spice physically possible. Ended up giving it 3.5 stars. It was solid. These books are just all spice. There's a little bit of substance, but they're novella-sized books. I think this audiobook, with the speed I listened to it at, was 3 or 4 hours long. Like, it was not long. Solid book. I'll probably end up getting that one just so I can finish my collection, but I will say the sapphic romance, again, top tier, very good spice. Katie Robert is known for her immaculate spice. This one's no different. The final book. I ended on a very high note. I read Flawless by Elsie Silver. I've heard such good things about this series. This follows a older bull rider and his agent's daughter. He's trying to rebuild his reputation, and she is trying to essentially be his babysitter and help him rebuild that reputation. And of course, they end up falling for each other in the meantime because it's very forced proximity. And the growth of these characters was so good, and there were so many heavy topics of trauma, of grooming was a big one in this, as well as complex family dynamics. We have the big stepmother, stepsister, Cinderella kind of aspect to it, and just her family treating her like, her stepmother and stepsister treating her like crap, but her father does love her immensely. So we do have some healthy relationships in here. But Rhett had some issues, and he works through them throughout this entire story, which, again, I am huge into character development. This had that in leagues. So I gave this 5 stars. I love this. I'm definitely continuing on with this series. And that is it. That is my June wrap up. Read a lot of really good books. I only had like 2 books I can look at where I'm like, they were kind of meh. So really strong June. Hoping that I continue that trend for July. I have a lot more audiobooks put up. Depending on when this video comes out, I am probably already in New Zealand or just about to leave. Not bringing a bunch of books to New Zealand with me. But that's gonna be it for today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We post every Wednesday and Friday, and I'll see you guys in our next video. Bye!